Chapter 3, The Regulars of Black Haven. The dawn came slowly to Black Haven, seeping through the grime-caked windows like watered-down milk. Ethan sat on the edge of a narrow cot in a room that smelled of old wood and dried blood, watching the pale light crawl across the floor. He had not slept. Every creak of the building, every distant footstep, had snapped his eyes open, his hand reaching for the faded script he now kept tucked in his inner pocket. The artifact was warm against his chest, almost alive. He had not yet fully understood its properties. The trial had granted it to him for reasons he was still piecing together, but he knew one thing with certainty. In this place, knowledge was currency, and artifacts were weapons. A knock at the door made him flinch. "Breakfast in 10. A woman's voice, low and even. "Main hall. Don't be late." Ethan rose, his joints protesting. He had not changed clothes since the bus, since the theater, and his shirt was still stained with the grey ash that had fallen like snow during the aberration's final dissolution. He ran a hand through his hair, considered his reflection in a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. The face that looked back at him was his own, but the eyes were different. Sharper. Older. He had survived 2 trials now. The statistics, as far as he had gathered from overheard whispers in the hallways last night, were brutal. Nearly 40% of newcomers died in their first trial. Another 30 in their second. Those who reached a third began to be counted among the regulars, a term that carried no comfort, only the grim acknowledgement of prolonged exposure to death. Ethan left the room and followed the corridor toward the main hall. Black Haven was larger than it had first appeared. The entrance hall where he had arrived was merely the tip of a sprawling structure that extended both above and below ground. The architecture was a jarring mix of styles. Gothic arches met brutalist concrete, Victorian wallpaper peeled over industrial steel beams. It felt less like a building and more like a wound-in space, a place that had been stitched together from the remains of 100 different structures. The main hall was a vast space with a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. A long wooden table dominated the center, scarred and stained, surrounded by mismatched chairs. A fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast a whole pig, though the flames gave off no warmth Ethan could feel. It was a prop, he realized. A fragment of normalcy in a place that had abandoned the concept entirely. 3 people were already seated at the table. The woman who had knocked on his door sat at the far end, a bowl of something steaming in front of her. She was in her late 20s, perhaps early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of tired, watchful eyes that came from having seen too much. Her hands were steady as she lifted a spoon, but Ethan noticed the slight tremor in her fingers when she set it down. Doctor's hands, he thought. Or surgeons. The tremor wasn't weakness. It was the aftermath of adrenaline, barely suppressed. "Ethan, right?" She gestured to a chair. "Sit. Eat. The food's real, at least." He took a seat 2 chairs away from her, positioning himself with his back to the wall and a clear view of both entrances. Old habit, honed by years of navigating open-plan offices and crowded subways. In Black Haven, it felt less like paranoia and more like basic survival. The man across from him was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver-grey hair and a face lined by weather and time. He wore a tweed jacket that might have been expensive decades ago, now patched at the elbows and stained along the cuffs. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they regarded Ethan with the calm, appraising gaze of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by anything. "Silas Granger," the man said, extending a hand. His grip was firm but brief. "Welcome to Black Haven. I imagine you have questions." "Several thousand," Ethan said. The third person at the table snorted. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with the look of someone who had spent his life using muscle instead of mind. His face was flushed, and his hands, resting on the table, were clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "Questions won't keep you alive, newbie," he said. "Rules will. Luck will. Everything else is decoration." "Jack," the woman said, a note of warning in her voice. "He just got here." And his still breathing. Jack's grin was humorless. "That's more than most can say after their first night. But he hasn't seen a real trial yet. The first 2 are orientation. The third is where it gets interesting." Ethan ladled some of the stew from a pot in the center of the table into a wooden bowl. The meat was unfamiliar but not unpleasant, and the broth was thick with root vegetables. He ate slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light, cataloguing the details of the room. The walls were covered in writing. Names, dates, symbols, fragments of rules. Some were recent, carved into the plaster with knives. Others were faded, almost illegible, as if they had been there for decades. A large map dominated the wall behind the fire, marked with 8 distinct circles arranged in a pattern Ethan did not immediately recognize. The gate system, Silas said, following his gaze. You've already passed through 2. The blood gate, that's what we call the trial gates, forms in response to specific conditions. Each gate leads to a trial. Each trial yields a fragment if you survive and solve it. Solve it. Ethan set down his spoon. The trials have solutions. All puzzles do. Silas smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. The question is whether you can find the solution before the puzzle kills you. The aberrations, the entities that inhabit the trials, are bound by rules. Those rules can be understood, manipulated, and ultimately exploited. The shadow theater, for example. You defeated the aberration, correct? Not through violence, but through understanding. Ethan said nothing. He did not know how much to share, how much trust to extend. These people were strangers, and in a place where survival depended on information, information was power. The fragment you earned, Jack said, leaning forward, where is it? Jack. The woman's voice was sharper now. That's not how we do things. I'm just asking. Jack's grin didn't waver, but his eyes had gone hard. We're all on the same side, right? The more fragments we have, the closer we get to the final gate. Sharing is caring. The fragments are bound to their owners, Silas said, his tone mild but firm. They cannot be stolen or transferred except under specific conditions. Jack knows this. He's testing you, Ethan. To see if you'll fold. Ethan met Jack's gaze and held it. I survived 2 trials. That means I'm useful. You don't make enemies out of useful people. Jack's grin faltered, just for a moment. Then he laughed, a harsh bark that echoed off the stone walls. You've got spine, newbie. We'll see how long it lasts. The woman pushed back her chair and stood. Come with me, Ethan. I'll show you around. Give you the lay of the land before the real work begins. She led him through a side door into a corridor lined with doors, each marked with a number and a symbol Ethan didn't recognize. Her footsteps were measured, deliberate, and she spoke without turning around. I'm Maya. Maya Reed. I've been here for about 18 months now. I think. Time gets strange in Black Haven. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. She stopped before a door marked with a symbol that looked like an eye within a circle. Days don't always match up. Sometimes I'll wake up and find that a week has passed without my noticing. Other times, I'll live through 3 days in the span of a single hour. The building exists outside normal time, or maybe time inside it is just flexible. She opened the door, revealing a small room lined with shelves. Books, papers, artifacts of various kinds were arranged in meticulous order. A desk sat in the center, covered in notes and diagrams. This is my workspace, she said. I'm a doctor. Or I was, before. Now I'm whatever Black Haven needs me to be: archivist, medic, occasional therapist for newcomers who can't handle the reality of their situation. And me? Ethan asked. What am I? That's what we need to figure out. She sat behind the desk, gesturing for him to take the chair opposite. Everyone who enters Black Haven has a role. Some are fighters. Some are puzzle solvers. Some are catalysts. People whose presence changes the dynamics of a trial, for better or worse. You survived 2 trials. That puts you in the upper percentile. But the 3rd trial is where the system really tests you. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Inside were photographs, sketches, handwritten notes. Ethan recognized the theater from his 2nd trial, the bus from his 1st. There's a pattern, Maya said. The trials aren't random. They're designed. Each one tests a specific aspect of the survivor: observation, memory, empathy, logic. The aberrations are tailored to exploit weaknesses. The rules are crafted to mislead. And somewhere in the architecture of each trial, there's a truth hidden beneath layers of deception. You sound like you've studied this extensively. I've had time. Her smile was tired. And I've seen too many people die because they couldn't see past the surface. The first 2 trials are relatively straightforward. The third? She shook her head. The third is where the system starts to get creative. A knock at the door interrupted them. Silas entered, carrying a small envelope sealed with wax. "This arrived for you," he said, handing it to Ethan. "It was found on the altar in the Chapel of Echoes this morning." Ethan took the envelope, turning it over in his hands. The wax seal bore an unfamiliar crest, a tree with roots that twisted into the shape of a gate. He broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, the ink slightly faded. Ethan Cole, you have walked through shadow and emerged into light. But the path ahead is one of reflection. When still water holds your gaze, do not trust the face that gazes back. The truth lies beneath the surface, weighted by stones you have not yet thrown. Seek the child who drowned in a voice of stone, and you will find the key to the gate of echoes. A friend. He read the letter twice, then passed it to Maya. Her expression darkened as she scanned the words. "Prophetic letters," she said. "They've been appearing more frequently. The Chapel of Echoes is a small sanctuary on the 3rd floor. Sometimes messages appear there overnight. No one knows who leaves them, or how. But they've never been wrong." "The Gate of Echoes," Ethan said. "That's the name of my 3rd trial. The letter suggests it." Silas's voice was quiet, contemplative. "The imagery is clear. Still water, reflection, something buried beneath the surface. Your next trial will likely involve water in some form." "The reflection in still water," Ethan murmured, remembering the letter's exact words. "Don't trust the face that gazes back." Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "That's a warning." In the trials, warnings are often literal. Silas moved to the window, staring out at the courtyard below. "The Gate of Threads has been active lately. They're a faction within Black Haven, not officially recognized, but they exist. They believe the final gate is meant to be controlled, not opened. That the fragments should be hoarded, used to consolidate power." "The Gate of Threads," Ethan repeated. "I've heard that name." "You likely survived an encounter with them in your 2nd trial," Silas said. "They send operatives into trials to eliminate competition, to steal fragments, to manipulate outcomes. They view the rest of us as pawns in a larger game." "We're all pawns," Maya said bitterly. "The question is who's holding the strings." The conversation was interrupted by a clatter from the main hall. Jack's voice, raised in anger. A crash of furniture. Maya was on her feet before Ethan could react, moving toward the door with a practiced urgency. "Stay here," she said. But Ethan followed anyway. The main hall had descended into chaos. A young man, barely out of his teens, Ethan guessed, lay on the floor, clutching his arm, which was bent at an unnatural angle. Jack stood over him, fist still raised, his face a mask of rage. "He tried to steal from me," Jack snarled. "My room. My artifacts." The little rat thought he could. "That's enough." Maya's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She knelt beside the young man, her hands moving efficiently over his injured arm. "This needs setting. Jack, if you've caused permanent damage." He should have thought about permanent damage before he entered my space. Ethan watched the scene unfold, cataloging details. Jack's aggression seemed excessive, theatrical almost. The young man's fear was genuine, but there was something else in his eyes, calculation. He had known what he was doing. He had wanted to be caught. Silas had not moved from the window. He observed with the detached interest of someone watching a play, waiting for the 3rd act. "Ethan." The voice came from behind him, soft as a breath. He turned to find a young woman standing in the shadows of a doorway, her pale face almost luminous in the dim light. She was small, delicate, with dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for her apparent age. "You're Vera," Ethan said. He remembered her from the faded photograph Silas had shown him earlier. A fragment in human form. A living piece of the puzzle. "I saw you in the theater," she said. "The shadow theater. I watched you survive. Can you see the trials?" "Sometimes. When they resonate with my nature." She stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost ethereal. "You did not trust the one in red. You found the hidden message. You understood that the rules were a cage, not a guide. That was luck. It was insight." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he felt as though he was falling into them, into depths that had no bottom. "You are different from the others. The architect's hand is heavy upon you." Before he could respond, she was gone, retreating into the shadows as silently as she had appeared. He turned back to the chaos of the main hall, but the scene seemed distant, muffled. The letter burned in his pocket. The truth lies beneath the surface. He walked to the window where Silas stood, looking out at the courtyard. A fountain sat in the center, dry and cracked, its basin filled with dead leaves and stagnant water. The reflection of the sky was murky, distorted. "What happens when someone fails a trial?" Ethan asked. Silas did not look at him. "They die. Usually. Sometimes they become something else. The aberrations were once human, after all. And the fragments? When 12 are gathered, the final gate opens. According to the architect's design, the gate leads to the world tree's heart. There, a choice can be made. A reset. A new beginning. A reset that would erase everything. That is the theory." Silas finally turned, his pale eyes meeting Ethan's. "But theories are cheap in Black Haven. The truth is something you must find for yourself." The day passed in a haze of introductions and orientations. Maya showed him the infirmary, the armory, the library. Jack avoided him, though Ethan caught the brute watching him from across rooms, his expression unreadable. Silas retreated to his quarters, claiming the need for rest but clearly wanting distance. By evening, Ethan had mapped enough of Black Haven's layout to navigate without assistance. He had spoken to a dozen other survivors, each with their own stories, their own scars. Some had been here for years. Others were barely days old, still trembling with the shock of their first trial. They all shared one thing, a desperate hope that the final gate would offer salvation. Ethan did not share that hope. He had seen too much, learned too much, to believe in easy answers. The architect's design was not mercy. It was calculation. And somewhere in that calculation, Ethan suspected, he was not a player but a piece. Night fell, and with it came a change in Black Haven's atmosphere. The corridors grew darker, the shadows deeper. Lights flickered. Footsteps echoed in empty rooms. Ethan sat in his quarters, the letter spread before him, the faded script warm against his chest. He had read the prophetic words a dozen times, searching for hidden meanings, for clues about the trial to come. Seek the child who drowned in a voice of stone. A child. Water. Stone. The images swirled in his mind, forming patterns he could almost grasp but not quite hold. A knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. He opened it to find Maya, her face troubled. "We need to talk," she said. "Privately." She entered without waiting for permission, closing the door behind her. Her hands were trembling now, the tremor more pronounced than before. "I've been in Black Haven for 18 months, she said, her voice low. "In that time, I've seen exactly 2 people survive more than 6 trials. One of them is Silas. The other died last month, torn apart by an aberration that should not have been there." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the system is rigged." She met his eyes, and he saw fear in them, genuine fear, not the performance he had seen in others. "The trials adapt. They learn. They become harder, more personal, more cruel. And the fragments." She paused, as if weighing whether to continue. "The fragments are not just keys. They're anchors. They bind us to the system, make us part of the architect's design. You think the final gate is a trap. I think everything in Black Haven is a trap." She sat on the edge of his cot, her shoulders slumped. But I also think there's a way out. A way that doesn't involve playing by the rules. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a piece of polished stone, black and smooth, carved with symbols that seemed to shift when Ethan looked at them directly. What is that? A piece of the world tree. Silas doesn't know I have it. The gate of threads would kill me if they knew. She held it out to him. Take it. Study it. It might help you in the trial to come. Ethan hesitated. Trust was a luxury he could not afford, and Maya was still a stranger. But the stone called to something deep within him, a resonance that he could not explain. He took it. The moment his fingers touched the surface, he felt a surge of energy, a flash of images, a forest burning, a tree falling, a voice screaming in a language older than words. Then it was gone, and the stone was cold and inert in his palm. The trials are coming faster now, Maya said. The architect's design is accelerating. You'll face the gate of echoes within the week. Maybe sooner. How do you know? Because I've been feeling it. The building trembles. The walls whisper. Something is approaching. She stood, moving toward the door. Be careful, Ethan. Trust no one. Not Silas. Not Jack. Not even me. Then why give me this? He held up the stone. Because someone has to break the pattern. Her smile was sad, resigned. And I've been here too long to be that person. She left, and Ethan was alone with the stone and the letter and the weight of everything he did not yet understand. He lay on the cot, the stone clutched in his hand, staring at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster formed patterns, faces, shapes that dissolved when he tried to focus on them. The shadows moved in ways that light could not explain. Somewhere in the building, a door opened. Footsteps approached, then stopped. A whisper, too faint to hear, that nevertheless carried meaning he could almost grasp. He closed his eyes, and behind his lids, he saw water. Still water, dark and deep, reflecting a face that was his own but different, older, sadder, marked by knowledge he had not yet earned. The reflection smiled. And then it spoke, in a voice that came from miles away and centuries ago. Asterisk, come find me, Ethan. I've been waiting a long time. Asterisk. His eyes snapped open. The room was empty. The stone was warm in his hand. And the letter on the table had changed. New words had appeared, written in the same elegant script. Asterisk 3 days. Asterisk. He stared at the message, his pulse hammering in his throat. 3 days until the trial. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to learn what the letter meant, what the stone meant, what his own reflection meant. He rose and walked to the window. The courtyard below was bathed in moonlight, the fountain casting long shadows across the stones. The water in the basin was still, perfectly still, and the surface showed him nothing but the sky. But he knew it was waiting. The gate of echoes was waiting. And somewhere in its depths, a child who had drowned in a voice of stone held the key to everything. Ethan touched the stone in his pocket, feeling its warmth, its promise, its warning. He did not know if he was ready. He did not know if he would survive. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not the same man who had boarded that bus 3 nights ago. And he never would be again. The darkness of Black Haven pressed against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a bell began to toll. 11 strikes, slow and deliberate, each one vibrating through walls and floor and bone. Ethan counted them, and when the last one faded, he heard something else, a whisper, rising from the fountain below, from the earth itself, from the shadows that clung to the corners of his vision. Asterisk 3 days. Asterisk. He returned to his cot, but he did not sleep. He sat in the darkness, the stone in one hand, the letter in the other, waiting for the dawn that would bring him closer to the gate. The hours passed, marked by the slow crawl of moonlight across the floor. And when the first pale light of morning finally touched his face, Ethan Cole rose and prepared to meet his fate. In Black Haven, there were no guarantees. But there was always a choice. And he intended to make his count.